be assisting her in the room, I would like to turn the time over to Michael Birkenbeil, our Deputy Designated Federal Officer. Mike.
Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you again, and welcome to day 2 of the October Hanford Advisory Board meeting. Got an echo there. Test.
Just double check your mute on your online.
I think we got it. As Lacey said, I'm the Deputy Designated Federal Officer for the Hanford site. As a reminder, this meeting will be conducted in accordance with the requirements of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Advisory committees have played an important role in shaping programs and policies of the federal government. The Hanford Advisory Board's role is to provide policy-level advice and recommendations concerning EM site-specific issues, such as cleanup activities and environmental restoration, waste and nuclear materials management and disposition, excess facilities, future land use and long-term stewardship, risk management, and communications and outreach. I appreciate your attendance today, and I look forward to the Hanford Advisory Board's development and submission of constructive, actionable policy-level advice on the Hanford site. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Jan, would you like to welcome folks?
Okay. How are you? Good morning. My name is Jan Cottrell. I am the interim chair for the Hanford Advisory Board. I have been asked to remind you that today is really your day to sign up for your committees. You are entitled to sign up for 2 committees, and everyone is a part of the PIC committee, the Public Involvement Committee. But if you were to put that committee on your list of 2 other committees, it would facilitate you getting the emails and the notices about meetings. But anyone is welcome to a PIC meeting regardless of whether you sign up for it or not, but you can sign up for it. So we're looking forward to a productive meeting today, and I'm so glad to see everyone back again today. So I'm glad that you weren't just totally scared off by the late hour that we adjourned last night. So we're going to have to get used to doing those later meetings, but the turnaround to an early morning meeting on the next day is quite welcome. So we'll be looking forward to the work that we have to produce today. So thank you.
All right, let me give you, I'm really sorry I'm not in the room with you. One logistic, Lacey is my eyes in the room because I actually can't see you. If you want to speak, there are 2 ways to let us know. Your name card in front of you, if you're in the room, it goes up on its side. That's a visual in the room for Lacey to pick up. If you are online with us in Teams, you can also indicate that you'd like to speak in chat. What's going to happen is Lacey's going to keep that list. We call it the queue. So if you look in chat, there'll literally be the letter Q and a list of names. And that's the list we'll work off of to make sure everybody gets to speak, ask your questions, make your comments. It's just the logistic of how we do it in a group that is this big. And if we miss one of you, do not be afraid to raise your hand, wave at us, and let us know. We try to get it right, and sometimes it gets a little out of order. Today, the board is going to do 2 things, and then there's a bonus session. So we're going to start off talking about the FY 2023 work plan. It's the working year that starts this month and goes through next September. We've got some time for board business. That typically looks forward to topics for next meeting and other things of concern. We'll have a really short update on the operations work group. Periodically, we take a look at how we operate as the board and how we can improve, and that's really what that group is doing. We've got a presentation on the waste treatment plant and what you will hear called DF law. That's direct feed low activity waste. That is a piece of the treatment of tank waste related to the waste treatment plant.
Like so many, his mouth is full. I don't want to see scary things. Wait, no.
Right.
So luckily Ruth can mute anyone who's online.
Right. So I'm going to confess that I can mute everybody. You are the only one that can unmute yourself if you're on Teams. So either look for the little microphone icon on your screen, or if you are only with us on phone, *6 gets you unmuted. So I can mute everybody, but only you can unmute yourself. So where was I? We're going to talk about the work plan. We have board business. We have an update on the waste treatment plan. And then we're going to adjourn the formal HAB meeting at 11:30. Take a break. The room needs a little bit of resetting. You don't have to move your seats. It's my staff and the DOE folks who are going to do a little bit of prep. And then returning after break at 11:45, we're going to have a public meeting to gather public to answer questions and feedback on the Hanford 5-year cleanup plan. So that's the bonus session today. Are there questions about what we're going to do today between now and 1 o'clock? Anyone? Well, with that, I am going to turn it over to Jan to kick off the discussion about the FY 2023 work plan. FY is what we use shorthand for fiscal year. Jan?
So this is our opportunity to work toward consensus for the 2023 work plan. I was really glad that part of the discussion yesterday highlighted the fact that there does not seem to be any resistance to approving the work plan as far as we could discern from the discussion in the group. The main problem, of course, is whether we can reach quorum, and Josh is tasked with determining that, I think. Is that correct, Josh?
I've been keeping account as people have been coming in so far, yes.
And what is your assessment?
Presently, we're at 12 people counting towards quorum.
12 people towards quorum, and we need
At least 15.
at least 50%, right? And at least 15 people. And how many people are on the phone, Ruth?
When I ask staff to count quorum, they count both people in the room and people on the phone.
Huh.
We've got Rob Davis in queue. Rob, do you have something on your mind?
Yes, probably shouldn't have let me relook at this.
Can't quite hear you.
You probably shouldn't have let me relook at this. We should have approved it yesterday. In the May 23rd schedule for the Tank Waste Committee, it's listed that we're going to look at system plan, et cetera. How difficult is it to add to that discussion on the agreement order? It'll be 6 months since we've heard about it. We need to see some progress. What decisions were made on the covering or dewatering, or how the progress is going on that. And I think 6 months is long enough to be able to get some kind of feedback to the board on the agreement. What do you think, Gary?
Rob, this is Dan McDonald from Ecology. Can you clarify a bit more? Are you looking for information on what the agreed order says, or are you looking for information as to how the agreed order affects the system plan? Help me understand, please.
No, I'm really looking at what progress is being made. We were told yesterday that there's a lot of meetings and discussions, and they couldn't basically say what exactly they were going to do. And so I think 6 months is long enough to get some kind of read on the direction they're going for which tanks and how that's going to be applied to future. So, not so much system plan, but really into the continuing understanding about the leaking tanks and what the agreed order and how it's working, because, we do have apparently some sort of a challenge to it already. And so if that is clear to people, I'd really like to have that May tank waste meeting be some sort of discussion, or maybe a full board meeting. If you want to add it as a topic in a full board, that's fine with me, but it's an important topic.
Thank you, Rob. And you are currently the chairman of the Tank Waste Committee, is that correct? So these are things that are certainly within your scope and purview. So, and as I look at this document, which has the work plan and calendar description, that's the one that you were saying we should never have let you have the time to read it. Okay, so I am just picking it up now, and I'm looking at page 5.
Jan, I apologize for interrupting. I think Dave Bowen has a comment.
Oh, I like that. David Bowen is going to answer your question.
Yeah, good morning. I was meant to just be listening this morning, but I'm fine with giving an update on where we are with the agreed order. Rob, the variable is whether the appeal is resolved by then or not, on how much information can be provided. But I'm happy to give progress report anytime with the team. And then Ryan, I see maybe wanting to correct me. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, not correcting you, David. My suggestion would be, as we've said before in multiple venues, I think, and Gary said this, is that this work plan is flexible. It's kind of like Jello. We can add topics to it as needed. Just for an example, the agreed order wasn't on the work plan for the meeting yesterday, but I requested it, and then we got it put on there. I would almost suggest that we don't set a specific date, given the nature of the appeal and stuff, but that Dave and I can bring the topic to, the tanks, 6 months, 7 months, however long, when we're able to give an update to you guys.
Next on the queue is Robert Thompson.
Yeah, I listened in last night, and the dialogue in regards to the leaking tank issue, in regards to the appeal, at least the portions that I was listening to, didn't really describe what's going on. So the work plan's created, process moving forward was decided with Department of Energy, Department of Ecology, EPA, but that is subject to review. And Mr. Bowen, I think not everybody, at least my listening skills could have been compromised, I guess, but the status of it and why things aren't moving forward, Rob, there's actual potential litigation issues. So they're sealed shut, for lack of a better way. But that's my inarticulate way of saying why you're not hearing more. But Mr. Bowen, if you have that opportunity, you might be able to clarify the status.
Sure, I can clarify. The elements within the order are moving forward regardless of the appeal at the moment. So, there's agreements to perform different tasks over the next 12 months. There's agreements to check in 6 months into it on status. So the agreed order and its elements and its implementation is moving forward. It's just we don't exactly know what the legal arguments are at the moment against the agreed order. So we're kind of keeping everything close to our chest as far as, any strategic items that we're working on, et cetera. Yeah, until we can get a clearer picture of exactly what the appeal is about, if it's going to be resolved before it goes to a hearing, all those things. But the elements in the agreed order itself are moving forward and being implemented.
Thank you, David. So Are you satisfied, Rob, that you have the freedom as the chairman of the Tank Waste Committee to bring topics to the attention of the people who are making the agendas for the meetings, and that you could even call perhaps for a call or a meeting for your committee?
Yeah, I think that as long as we have that freedom. And I think 6 months into it, I know Delmar mentioned he's got $18 million to spend on R&D. So, I'd like to hear what the progress is.
Yeah.
And
And we're hearing that somehow this legal entanglement may be slowing down the work. I don't know if that's true or not. And I also want to ask you, Gary, if you agree that the agenda process and the topics for each committee are subject to update and additions as necessary.
Yes.
Perfect. So are you satisfied with that? Okay, we got a thumbs up. Are there any other questions or concerns that people have about the work plan?
So a note for our newer soon-to-be members. Agendas for meetings, whether it's a committee meeting or a full board meeting, are a collaborative effort between a group of at least 6 people. The chair and the vice chair of either the committee or the HAB, a representative from each of the tri-party agreement agencies, so Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, Washington State Department of Ecology, and somebody from the facilitation team. So there is no one person who sits in a desk in a corner that does it alone. It's usually a group of 6 and sometimes a larger group than 6.
So if we were going to move on with the vote of for the work plan, we would have to be assured that we have a quorum. So I'm going to check with Josh again.
Since last check, we've gone up to 13. Still not enough.
So we're still too shy. You have 15. Would you and Josh confer? So that is to say that we have this time available to us. If we are not able to achieve a quorum, I don't think we should waste our time kind of spinning our wheels. It could be that we could achieve a quorum in a half an hour, depending on what happens on the phone, or someone who was lost out in Kennewick finds their way through the door. So one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is being able to have some time to kind of open-ended questions. What do you? Oh, okay. So would you turn on your microphone since I can't see at that distance?
Yes, I'll just say for the room, what Rose Ferry said on the chat. Yesterday it was stated quorum was 19, now it is 15. Can someone explain why?
Oh, well, it probably has to do with who was on the phone. What do you think? Oh, you're saying that the number that we needed to achieve is 15 instead of 19. So first, before we kind of try to address that very timely question, I'd like to hear from you, Max.
Oh, I think I was going to address the question you just talked about, Jen, which is
Oh, I see.
perhaps that the quorum requirements are based on the number of, I mean, it's the decision point, right? Is the quorum based on the number of seats that have been approved, that are currently approved right now and are existing, like state of Oregon, but excluding the Washington Fruit Growers Association because they haven't been approved yet? Or is it, of the entirety of seats that are going to be approved as of some date, maybe even today, right?
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's true that floating out there are 2 different means of achieving quorum. There's a more conservative number, and then there's a more liberal number. Without trying to sound too political about it, that's really how it works. So it's either 15 or 19, depending on the manner in which you count. And then all the unapproved members, of course, can't vote anyway. So if there is an approved member for a particular seat, even though they might not be here, that seems to have some bearing. So if we wanted to get into the weeds of that, I guess we would have to spend some time hearing from someone who is an expert in that regard. But for the time being, I was trying to move us past talking about the work plan for a moment so that maybe we could address some more general questions from the group. But Michelle, go ahead.
My question was for my entity, for example, and there may be some others. I have an approved alternate that was previously approved to the board. That if the question of approving the work plan was simply a question of needing my alternate to log in so that you have a quorum so that you can achieve that vote today, I'd be happy to execute that call if we're within 1 or 2 people of having a quorum for voting rather than delaying.
So that's good to know, and I'm sure that the facilitation team is making note of that. So not having achieved quorum at this moment, I know that we have some questions that have been posed for discussion. We got to find a better way to do this.
Jan, let me suggest that there was a request that we just do board business. And one of the requests for board business was a brief update on the operations work group. And then we typically look forward to the next board meeting, which in this case is the committee of the whole next month. Why don't we tackle those 2 issues now while we have time?
Well, I agree that we have time. Jeff Wright is in the queue. Oh,
I can't see the queue. So yeah, Lacey, keep track of the queue for us, please.
Just a general question. There's other entities that get involved in the Hanford cleanup, and I was wondering if perhaps you could comment on those. I'll give you a couple examples. There was a recent GAO report. I heard something yesterday about a defense board that I'm unfamiliar with. And then, of course, you've got labor unions and the contractors. So if somebody could maybe give us a broad brush overview of some of these other both internal and external influences on the cleanup, that would be helpful.
Jeff, I'm trying to understand the question so I know where to direct who to put on the spot, basically. Are you wanting an update on cleanup from those specific perspectives? Or do you have a specific question in mind?
I'm simply trying to understand all of these other influences that we should take into consideration when we're developing advice or seeking additional information.
Sorry, I lost the thread there, but the influences on the board are many and varied. I don't know what to say about that. We do have people come in and brief us from mostly here on the site from the tri-party agencies. Occasionally we have briefings from, I can recall the CRESP group, which is part of the FACA, and those are the kind of academicians who come in and talk to us from a scientific viewpoint. And they're out there, they're funded to work towards cleanup, but honestly, we don't see them very often. But as far as that defense thing, I understand that they were mentioned yesterday, but I don't have any associations about them. And I don't want to skip over Todd. Where are you, Todd? Oh, sorry. I don't want to skip over Todd, but I will, because part of your question had to do with the unions, and I think Becky probably can add some clarity. Rebecca?
Yeah, so by virtue of my seat on this board, I represent the Hanford Atomic Metal Trades Council. We represent about 2,800 of the craft workers that belong to the metal trades. So it's myself, and then my alternate is actually the president of HAMTAC, who is the alternate. So labor is represented on this board. We used to have a building trade seat, which I didn't see when I was looking through here. I don't know if that's been removed but we did at one point have a building trades representative as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. I want to make sure we close the loop on Jeff. Gary did the second. We used to have 2 union seats and 2 non-union, non-management seats on the board. It's my understanding we still have the 2 non-union, non-management seats, and they're in the packet to be approved. But the other union seat pulled out, is that correct?
Ruth, that's partially correct.
Okay.
The board has 2 members with non-management, non-union that are part of the board. And we have not only a couple, let's see, today we have Tracy Arnold, who's an incoming member for that position, waiting for approval. And then last evening we had Jacob Reynolds, who showed up, who's a primary. So let's see, I think Becky, are you also? No, you're Hamtech. So we've got a total of 4 employees out on site who are members of the board, either as primary and alternate. Hamtech has both primary and alternate, and the Central Washington Building Trades Council did not put forth a nominee for the last packet, and we are in talks with them to figure out what we can do to help get them back on board, because their voice is very important. So I hope that answers that. And I also have a slide that I can show with your permission to kind of help Jeff's question of people.
So you feel that the slide is relevant to his question?
I believe it is.
Okay, well, can you share the screen with Gary?
While you're getting that up, can I just clarify something then, Gary?
Go ahead, Becky, go
Okay.
ahead.
Because they didn't put someone forward, I see other seats listed on here that say vacant. I don't see the building trades listed on here at all.
They should be listed as a vacancy.
Okay, maybe I'm missing it. If somebody sees it, tell me where it is, because I don't see it.
Well, then it's probably an oversight, but they are still board members. They have a standing seat.
Okay.
Excuse
Perfect,
me,
thanks.
Gary, could you speak to the slide? It's kind of a busy slide, isn't it?
Sure. And actually, you're right, that there is a lot of information on there, and I will do what I can to kind of explain that. And Jeff,
is that the flag of Brazil in the middle?
close. What this does is it kind of represents who all takes a look at Hanford on a very regular basis. And we've got some different color codings on there. I will try to talk through this. Brian Vance often will bring this out about once a year or so, and he's very good at explaining it. So hopefully I will be able to walk through it. So if you start off at the 12 o'clock position, which is where it says Department of Energy, it's that lime green
Gary,
slice.
I don't think we can do this slide, but I have just asked this facilitation team if they can get color copies of this slide so that you can actually, decipher the information on it. It's just not big enough for
Sure.
a slide that we can't have on our laptops. We could see it if we had it on our
Sure.
laptops.
Well, I will just briefly describe it then. We work through a lot of government
Suddenly have a
agencies,
cough.
quasi-government agencies, Congress, Government Accounting Agency, DNFSB, the Defense Nuclear Securities Board, others. We also work with state regulators. We've got tribal governments that we are in regular consultation with, business groups. So we have a lot of people that are interested in what's going on, and every one of them has an opportunity to provide input to what it is that we do here in Hanford. And we also work to do outreach with all those organizations. So I hope that answers your question, Jeff.
Thanks,
I'm-
Gary. Yes,
So
this
let's,
is an excellent answer to my question.
Right, so Josh and Lacey, let's get a copy of that from Gary, and we can put it in with the documentation for this meeting, so people who may have had trouble seeing it also have a way to see it after the meeting.
Because some of the information is encoded in color, and even if you tried to print it out in black and white, it would be very hard to decipher it. So thank you very much for your efforts in making it available to the group. But I want to check with Jeff if your question that seemed to kind of focus on unions and trades, if your questions and concerns have been met.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's circle back around to Rebecca. Todd, if you will bear with us a minute, because Rebecca was jumping in and out. Let's make sure we close the loop with Rebecca and then go to Todd.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure what part of the loop I'm supposed to close.
Oh, well, we had you in queue, and I didn't know if you had a different question or something to bring up, or if we had covered it.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Thank you. Todd, thank you for waiting.
Did we decide whether we have 13 or 15?
We appear to have quorum now.
Thank you.
And now what are you saying?
Yeah.
Oh, so Michelle reached out to her alternate who is duly approved. And so he has weighed in on the matter of quorum. So Josh, could you confirm how many people we have for quorum at the moment? This is so important. You can see why, particularly we try to do some of this voting stuff at the beginning of the day when you're more likely to have lots of people that haven't wandered off.
We are presently at 16.
That's good enough, right? So let's circle back to the agenda that we are having a board discussion that maybe has just concluded, and we have an opportunity to adopt the work plan and the HAB the calendar for fiscal year 2023. And everyone who has a question or concern about this is encouraged to voice it now.
David Enan had a question online. He said, but was the difference between 15 and 19 explained?
So I'm reiterating what Lacey just said regarding a question that came from someone who is online who says, has the question of whether the quorum is 15 or 19 been satisfied? So that's a good question, because we have been talking about the fact that we have two means and methods of counting, and we have reached the threshold for one of the ways of counting the quorum, but not the second way of counting the quorum. So is there anyone who'd like to speak to that?
Let's go to Tom Cecilia. He's in queue.
It looks like the DDFO is in queue, and I'll let him go first.
Thank you. So I'm going to read from the HAB operating ground rules. The board may not hold a full board meeting either in the absence of a quorum which is at least half of the members or their alternates, or when the DDFO or representative appointed by the DDFO is not present.
So you're present. That's good. So would you read again the part that says that the meeting cannot be held unless what?
I'll read it again. And I'd also like to point out that this is in the operating ground rules that I know our new members given copies of, but probably haven't had an opportunity to digest all of that. And perhaps existing members haven't had the opportunity to look at in quite a while. So the board may not hold a full board meeting either in the absence of a quorum, which is at least half of the members or their alternates, or when the DDFO or representative appointed by the DDFO, usually Gary, is not present.
So the operative words there are, don't turn off your mic because I can't see your screen. Half of what? Half of
The members or half of the members or the alternates. Now,
members, but is members defined as seats or is it defined as individuals as part of the alternates,
positions.
primaries?
The department's position is that it's positions.
You're so perceptive.
One vote. I know it's a great question, and you were there. So one position, one vote. Yeah.
So, for every seat, then one position is, the seat represents in most cases 2 people. But some of the new members or some of the new seats on the board are only occupied by 1 person. They don't have alternates. So half of the seats or their alternates, right? Is that what it says?
One position, one vote. So not the primary and the alternate, just one. Either. Correct. Thank you, Bob. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And if you want to dive deeper into that, we're diving deeper into that. We've reached out to the DFO at headquarters and said, hey, look, we could use some help with this interpretation. We're wrestling with it here. And we just learned that this morning that they're going to reach out to Chief Counsel, and that might take some time. But that's what we have today. It's what's been in place for a while. So, and it sounds like we got quorum.
Yeah.
The next one will be consensus.
Yeah, it seems like we have quorum. But the operating ground rules, you should understand that the operating ground rules are due to be updated because we have more seats than we had a year ago. And there is the danger of using a method of achieving quorum that is more liberal, meaning that it requires fewer people in quorum in order to do business. But absolutely, we cannot do business without a quorum. So you begin to see about our emphasis about, attending meetings or even coming in person. All of these things have an impact on our ability to do the work of the board. And every one of you have come, approved or not, because you are committed to the work of the board. And the people who call in, they also have, are also counted depending on the quality of their appointment, whether they're primary or alternate, and one but not both. You know what I'm saying? And the primary has the first priority. So I must say that at the danger of setting a precedent that we may not want, I think that given that we have so many people here who come and give of their time, even though they have not gotten their letters yet, the packets have not been approved, and that is beyond our control. We know that if we could approve the packets, it would have been done before now. So, my inclination is to say that the method of the method of calculating the quorum will be sufficient for most purposes today. But look at our queue is exploding. So everyone, I mean, honestly, this is the consensus board, so everybody gets a voice.
So we're going to start with Dave from EPA and go to Tom Cecilia. Next, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. So I want to be really careful about the precedent
I guess.
question. We've, the entire history, it's been based on a quorum of the seats, not the members. And so there's this many seats, whether they're in place or not, there's a member that's in place or not, hasn't been part of the question in the past. So our quorum should be 19 based on that. Want to balance that with the fact that this work plan is a good work plan and we shouldn't be holding it up, right? And I don't want to waste everybody's time, and the fact that you've all made yourselves present for this meeting, either in person or on Teams, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to waste that. But I think we need to be really careful about this precedent. Just off the top of my head, one suggestion I could say is that if we want to proceed forward, go with the majority of seats that have been nominated and approved, the majority plus one, or 50% plus one, and that's what we assumed the queue was for today, and we'll get additional reads from general counsel. That's one possibility I'll throw out, because again, I don't want to hold up the process, but I am really worried about the precedent. Thank you.
Tom Cecilia, you've been waiting a while.
Yeah,
Why don't you go next?
I'm really worried about setting a precedent. And I think that we have a provisional work plan and calendar. If there is energy towards trying to get it approved with a new definition of quorum, we need to explicitly state in that in whatever approval document we're sending through that there are seats without representatives on the board, and potentially add a dissenting statement for those of us who agree with the work plan but not with the process.
So the plan, the work plan as you see it now was provisionally approved in June. So we're operating on that provisional work plan to do, for example, November's meetings, if that helps. Lacey, I got lost in the queue. Who's next?
Mike Berkebile.
Yeah, so just a follow-on comment. So as the deputy designated federal officer, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the HAB. And so if there were a more conservative approach taken, that is the approach that the quorum would be established based upon the appointments, not on the seats, and that were to result in a negative outcome, I'm responsible for that negative outcome. What I don't want to do before you today is propose that the department is taking a position that makes it more difficult to achieve a quorum. This is a work plan. It's a dynamic work plan, right? It's going to change in the future. So what I'm offering today for your consideration is that if this board would like to choose to advance this work plan via approval, and there's a negative consequence associated with that, I'm accountable for that negative consequence. But we're spending a substantial amount of time on this. We heard yesterday that there were concerns that if we didn't approve this work plan in a timely manner, that could have some impacts upon the agency's ability to present topics of information and value to you in the future. So I'm concerned about that as well. So if we were to take the two sides of this that I see at the moment, and I'm sure there are probably more, one of which is if we were to delay while we're waiting for general counsel or waiting to have the discussion and achieve a consensus on what quorum is, and that would impact our ability to provide information to you in the future in a timely manner. Or the other approach, which is to say, hey, we're going to take the time to work to it until we're satisfied with a number, which I think is now 15 to 19. I would prefer that we err on the side of making sure that we do what we need to do to get you the information in a timely manner so that you can continue to conduct business. What I haven't heard associated with this work plan yet, and I surmise that we may get there, is whether or not that we have consensus on approval of the content of the plan itself. So I just want to put out there for your information. If you move forward with the quorum as established by the interpretation of the department and the DDFO, and there's a negative consequence associated with that, I own it. But I want to be able to support you today.
So let me suggest that we go through the 4 people in queue and then call the question and continue moving on so that we can stay on time and hopefully get some work done. Max, you're up.
Thank you. This is a tedious discussion, isn't it? But it is important, just to state the obvious. And I think part of the challenge, and another obvious statement, is it just takes so long to get board members approved that you end up in this gap of time, right? And that's really what's happening in my mind, where people have expired seats that would be approved and hopefully will be approved, but it just takes so long to get those approvals. So, but a question is in here is how many?
Excuse me, Max, I'm just having trouble. Like maybe you're talking too fast.
All right, I apologize. I am a rapid speaker sometimes. Thank you. How many seats are on the board right now? Like just as of today, what do you count for the number of seats on the board right now?
28.
28. Okay. That's really all I wanted to know.
So that's 28 filled seats with appointed members.
28 appointments, either with primary or alternate, but there are 28 positions with a duly appointed person sitting in it right now.
Thank you, Gary. Rob Parmalee.
This may be more of a comment than anything, but and being new, I'm kind of interested in the ground rules has information in it and some requirements, and then the process manual notice also has some of the same things. And which has precedent over what we do here?
You know, that's such a good question. We're getting really perceptive questions. It means that people really are reading the material and that you have a mentor in Susan Coleman who knows this in her heart. So if you have these questions, this is part of what the working group is doing, is trying to harmonize the various foundational documents. And obviously, we don't revisit these documents with any regularity, but they do get signatures applied to the various documents over time. And some of these documents that we're operating from were approved in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So the operating ground rules, I mean, we have more people on the board now. Some people don't have alternates. You know, all of these things, you know, if it were a perfect world, they would already have been updated, but we're a consensus board and it takes a while, and it's been COVID and there haven't been people available. And Gary has to, you know, listen in for all the meetings, even if you have them by phone. So you can see why the working group becomes a very kind of economical way to get people in a room so that we can talk about what the discrepancies are and what would be better. So we're kind of in the middle of that. we hope that we will have something from the working group, like some advice. We won't call it advice. Maybe it is advice, but some advice about what needs to be changed or updated in order to harmonize the various documents. But we are right in the middle of this right now. We're talking about two means of calculating quorum. We're talking about whether seats are occupied or unoccupied and whether they count if they're vacant even. And a lot of other things that impact our ability to do business. But I feel that since we have so many interested people in the group, that we have no major disagreements with the work plan. None have been voiced. Rob had a concern that was addressed, and Jeff had a concern that was addressed. So I think, am I being interrupted now? Am I being interrupted? Yes.
I'm worried about time and the number of people in queue. Rob, the short version is the operating ground rules in the hierarchy of documents come before the process manual. And the work group is working on making those things align better. That's the short version.
And I'm okay with that. The only reason I bring it up is because Mike brought up how the ground rules specifies a quorum, but there's also a definition of a quorum in the process manual, and that's the only reason I brought it up, which is seems to be a little bit different. So
it's true.
As long as we decide which one we follow and we follow it, then I'm okay with that.
The facilitation team calculates quorum every year after all the appointments are in and seats and people are known. And we're just, as Max pointed out, we're in this weird limbo place. I've got Denise, Rebecca, and Steve Anderson. Denise?
Good morning, everyone. I just want to say thank you to Mike for putting himself out there and the agency and seeing if we want to have a quorum today, we can, even though we're in a weird place. I don't have any problems with the plan and the calendar, and I'm okay with moving forward, but I don't want to create like a precedent that could change things in a way that we don't want it by voting without everyone. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Thanks, Ruth. I think I'll just withhold my comment. I'm on the working group, so we can work that out in the working group. Thank you.
Steve Anderson.
No, she voiced my opinion. So again, appreciation, Mike. Thanks for stepping up. I think we're ready to go. Thanks.
Great segue, Steve. So, Madam Chair, would you like to call the question?
Oh, Robert Thompson, sorry.
Just real quick, I'd like to actually formally make a motion because that's how I think these things are supposed to work. So I'm going to, you guys criticize the words because I'm still a little unclear, but I want to make a motion to approve not only the work.
Sorry, dear, we don't use Robert's Rules of Order here.
All right. So I still want to make a motion just so I feel better about the process.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve the Hanford work plan and the calendar that is associated with it. And the word provisional comes in as long as council says it's legitimate, which covers everybody's bottom. So because there's a little contention in some regards, I think that motion covers everybody in regards to a process that moves forward, allows the board to do what it does, but also gives us a little comfort, shall we say, should it be overturned. So that's the reason for an official motion, ma'am.
Very good. And just to remind you that he is his background, he's an elected official. He's a person who uses Robert's Rules of Order. We're here in a place where we are consensus building. We're going to have a unanimous vote. We're not having an up and down vote. But we understand that the consensus item is the calendar and the work plan for fiscal year 2023. Can everyone live with that? Yes.
Yes.
Are there any concerns, questions that wish to be voiced at this time? Go ahead.
Luann?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that I would request that we, I guess, put into the calendar are tribal holidays as well.
And how many are there?
I was trying to look that up in my email, but I can get that information to you.
And
this
what
morning.
impact would tribal holidays have on the HAB?
Well, I just want it recognized because the Yakima Nation does have tribal holidays that we honor. And I know in the past, like when I first joined HABs, that was actually brought up in previous conversations. So I'm following up on that.
I
That
see.
we include it.
And with the understanding that it may or may not impact our decisions having
Right.
to do with the calendar itself.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lorraine, this is Gary over here. If you will forward the list of holidays to me, we'll take that into consideration. Because I have no clue what they are. I have the Nez Perce calendar, but I don't have anything from the Yakima Nation. So I would like to be sensitive to your need.
And we should also check with Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla as well.
So honestly, Ruth, I don't know what the protocol is for me to announce that the calendar and the work plan has been approved. What more do I need?
We didn't, we've got Tom, Cecilia, and Q. We didn't hear any outright objections. You did ask for, are there any concerns? So we're in that piece of it. But I didn't hear anybody blocking.
Well, what I need to know is what I do going forward from here.
We put Tom in queue and see what he has to say first.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tom?
I would like to request, as I said before, that the seats that have no appointed members on the board right now be listed as not included in consensus. I also, Max stepped away from the table for a moment so I could speak, but I would like to put a dissenting opinion in, not blocking consensus, but sort of like what we did with advice 259, I think it was, where don't agree with the process. So like to abstain and put a dissenting opinion in.
Thank you, Tom. And would you kindly put into the chat the exact wording that you would like to have recorded regarding your dissenting kind of opinion? I understand you're not blocking the vote, but we'd like to have the words from you.
Yes, and if facilitation can come up with a list of the seats, the interests that are not represented at this time, that would be helpful as well.
Thank you. Other concerns?
For those of you who are new to the board, this is a part of the process. Seats can abstain from a consensus, and seats can also add a minority report or a statement like Tom has requested. So what you are seeing is a bit unusual, but it is within the board process.
And it certainly does reflect the issue that is being, considered. And I like that language of a kind of a minority report. It sounds a little bit more, I don't know, official, but I think that it's important that since we always strive for consensus, that Tom has indicated that he is not blocking the consensus. And if they were, that would be language more like, I cannot live with this, or I cannot approve it. So He's not saying that. He's saying that he wants to have the issue a part of the permanent record.
Plan. Luann, I have you in queue.
She may have just been saying yes to the, I wasn't sure on the chat. She, just with Michael Mays, she may have just been saying yes to move
Okay,
forward.
okay. All
But I did
right,
want to
and-
say, oh, just Aaron
No, keep
break.
going.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ruth.
No, keep going. Just check in with Erin.
Yeah, she just made 2 comments in the chat supporting the DDFO's recommendation on moving forward with quorum having been established. I just wanted to make sure that her voice was heard.
So, oh, are you lifting your card? Oh, Chris, see, we got to get those orange things. Okay, good.
Yeah, this is a question for Ruth. At least since I've been on the board, this is the first time at an in-person meeting we've ever had a vote. And when everything was virtual, when something came to a vote, we had to send in an email to you or make some indication to you. So in person here, do we formally have to write something down or make some formal indication, yes or no, consistent with what we did in our virtual meetings? That kind of goes to what Jan was asking too.
Right, we can, there are a variety of ways to do it. The reason when we were totally virtual, we did it that way was we literally couldn't look around the room and see heads nod. So that was our way of tracking it because I physically couldn't see you. The way we did it now was more in reverse of, were there any objections? When we're really not sure, sometimes we do a roll call, but it changes based on the sense of how much agreement is in the room. And you've heard multiple people say they weren't hearing objections to the content of the work plan and calendar. And so that's why we did it this way, was because we weren't hearing concerns about the content. We were hearing concerns about the process. I hope that helps.
Okay, so there's no formality we have to go through. It's a kind of an informal yes or no based upon one introduction.
Right, but the onus is on seats to speak up when they have a concern or an objection, similar to what Tom just did.
Go ahead.
Max, I see you in queue.
Thank you for addressing some of these process questions. I think many of us who might be used to a Robert's Rule of Order type of a board would function where there's a motion and then there's debate, right? And I'd actually wanted to address the content of the calendar and say I would support approving the calendar with the inclusion of the Native American tribal holidays on that calendar. And I think that's maybe just one thing to capture for the record, that if we're approving making a change to a document that's in front of us, that we're actually, and even if we don't vote, seat by seat vote, that inclusion of a change is what I would recommend for approval, right? So it's that calendar plus the change as requested to include the Native American holidays is what I would support for approval, right? So that's both content and process. How about that?
So thank you, Max, for bringing that to light. And I see that you have moved your chair back to the table after Tom Cecilia spoke. And that is as it should be. So perhaps, Josh, you can, in the notes, if you have not already, reflected the fact that there was a change made to the calendar to add tribal holidays from the Yakima tribe.
So let's go to Rob briefly, then we must take a break because we have people coming at 10:15 for a presentation. So we need to make sure we honor that 10:15 start time. Rob?
Just a comment to address the, I don't know his name down there. But if we have at some point that we took, identified who was at the meeting, then you've got all of the names.
we have that.
Right? So you have that. Everybody at the meeting that was here, you identified those people were in consensus. We've got the people in teams. If they have a concern, they can make it a queue and you can capture that. So I think that would take care of his concern down there.
Yeah, there's a sign-in sheet and you're associated with
Okay, so
seats. It's
good.
true. Mhm. Rebecca?
Yeah, so real quick, I just want to ask a question. Because he said that he would approve the calendar as long as we added the Native American holidays. And what I heard from Gary was that it would be taken into consideration. So is that, is that going to be a dissenting vote if it's not added to the calendar? Or, so I think it needs to be clarified because what I heard was that it was going to be taken under consideration.
Mhm. Thank you, Rebecca, for bringing that to our attention. And we'll just clarify with Gary whether you intend to include the Yakama Nation's holidays on the calendar.
If that is the desire of the board, I will be happy to add that. I have holidays from the Nez Perce, and Lorraine has committed to forwarding holidays for the Yakama Nation, and I will include that, and I will also reach out to the Umatilla tribe and make sure that we honor those requests.
So that sounds to me like an affirmative answer. Does anyone disagree with that? All right, so hearing no further concerns, objections, or questions, I hereby offer that consensus has been reached on the 2023 calendar and work plan with the changes that have been voiced. Are we ready to go on break?
Right. So folks, this is going to be a short break. Please be back in your seats at 10:15 because we have folks coming in for this presentation. So it's a short break. Be in your seat at 10:15, please.
Welcome back. We have a presentation kind of up, getting ready to go from Matt Irwin. And please say your name again. You're not Val. Chris, thank you very much. On the topic of DF law or direct feed, low activity waste. If you were on the tour the other day, we went by the buildings and you saw them, and now you're maybe going to see them from a bird's eye view. So thank you very much.
All right. Oops. So I apologize. I have a loud voice. I'm going to stay away from the microphone, even though I know there's some people. So if the people online don't hear me, please tell me, but I don't think that'll be a problem. So thanks for this opportunity to come talk to you here this morning. As was mentioned, my name is Matt Irwin. I'm the Deputy Assistant Manager for the Waste Treatment and Mobilization Plant at Hanford. I work for Office of River Protection, and to my left here is my peer, Chris Music. He's the Deputy Project Director for the project. As I think you already know, we're in a very exciting time, and really appreciate the opportunity to share with you where we're at and answer any questions that you may have. Between Chris and Val and I, we've gotten to present to a bunch of audiences this week, whether that's the Hanford Communities Governing Council or the local chapter of the American Nuclear Society. So this is discussing things that are very near and dear to our heart that we're living each and every day. So really appreciate the opportunity to tell you where we're at. So you want to go to the next slide, Mike? So this is just at a very high level. I'm going to give a little bit of discussion at the programmatic level, the direct feed low activity waste program level. Then I'm going to hand off to Chris to do the fun stuff, which is talk about the exciting things we have going on at the plant today. And then Chris will hand it back to me at the end. We'll talk a little bit about the rest of our tank waste treatment mission. And then basically the process we'll go through to get to the point of hot commissioning. So next slide. And I'm going to stand up here in a minute to cover some things that I can point to better up on the screen. But really, this is just talking about the fact that the whole low activity waste function is to use vitrification to manage our low activity tank waste, which is basically the supernate that's that's on the top of the tanks. As I think all of you know, right, we've got 177 aging tanks. We got 28 double shell tanks, and we will be pre-treating that waste through the tank side cesium removal system. That pre-treat then will come to law, and we'll turn it into glass and dispose of it. I'm going to talk about that in greater detail. This just also highlights that the technology we're using is proven technology that's also in use at Sellafield and at the Defense Waste Processing Facility at Savannah River. So next slide. This is where, so I apologize for those of you in the room, this is probably too busy for you to really get in detail, which is why I wanted to stand up. But what this slide is to highlight is the direct feed low activity waste program function is a function that's across all of DOE Hanford. So although Bechtel has been our prime contractor for the engineering, procurement, construction, and commissioning.
No, you.
All right. All right. Function. All of the other prime contractors have to support this mission for us to be successful. And this slide is intended to highlight that. So if we start up here in the upper portion of the slide in yellow, you'll see that's the AP tank farm. So that tank farm is managed by the WPS prime contractor, our tank farm contractor. Right adjacent to AP farm is the tank side cesium removal system. Basically, we're taking feed from AP 107, processing it through that, and we call it Tisker, and that takes out the cesium and the particulates, and then it stages it in the AP 106 tank. From I don't know whether you guys are having tank farm discussion, but they're basically approaching 400,000 gallons. The goal is to have them. Oh, okay, is that helpful for people online? All right, I'll use a microphone. The goal is to have 1 million gallons staged to feed the low activity waste facility when we get to hot commissioning. The orange line that here comes to the foreground and then takes a 90-degree angle, that's basically the double-lined piping system that sends the waste from tank farms to the law facility. The law facility here in the center, and Chris is going to talk in detail on that. That's the heart of where we actually make the glass. It passes through the effluent management facility. That's our low point drain. The only reason that's significant is if we lose power or lose pumping capability, we want to make sure that the radioactive liquids all go to one place where we can then pump it one way or the other to the degree we need to. Then within this boundary, and Chris is going to talk about it, is all of the WTP facilities that support the infrastructure and steam, other things that support the law facility. We, in the process of vitrifying tank waste, we also have an off-gas train that's making sure that we treat the off-gas before it's released through the stack. That's a multi-stage train that includes things like a submerged bed scrubber, a wet electrostatic precipitator, carbon bed, HEPA filters, a thermocatalytic oxidizer, and a caustic scrubber. And I say all of those things, and I wouldn't expect any of you to follow all of those, although I'm sure some of you do. But each of those has a secondary cooling loop because the melters are operating at 2100 degrees. The off gas is very hot, so it has to be cooled so that it can go through those treatment trains and they can do what they need to do. So for each gallon of waste that we put through the low activity waste facility, we'll create two gallons of secondary liquid cooling that we then have to process. Over at the effluent management facility, we have an evaporator. That evaporator will evaporate off the water. That condensate then goes down to the liquid effluent retention facility, which is an existing water treatment facility managed by our tank farms contractor. They'll process that waste and take care of that part of it. And then the bottoms, which are the particulates, the sodium, that'll get fed back into the low activity waste as part of our feed stream, and it'll get vitrified into the glass. From a container standpoint, the containers come into the low activity waste facility. They are filled with the glass in stages. They're allowed to cool. Then their confirmation of no contamination on the outside. Dose rates for those containers are expected to be very low, a couple of millirem per hour, and lidded. And then they'll be sent to the integrated disposal facility, which is a dual line trench in the 200 East area managed by the Central Plateau contractor, or CPCco, as they're affectionately called. So that's another contractor that's supporting the effort. And then along the bottom of this slide is showing all of the infrastructure support. So the HMIS contractor, our mission support contractor, they provide things like the electrical distribution, our water and sewer. They maintain the roads. They provide our information technology and our emergency management. So it takes all the contractors on the Hanford site to working together. We have interface control documents that help make sure everybody has an understanding of what their roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities are. Next slide. All right, this slide is really just to show a day in the life. It gives some of the particulars for how the waste goes through the process. It starts in tank farms. We've already talked about that. This just shows how it gets processed from tank farms over through Tisker into AP 106. In that particular case, it's 7,200 gallons a day. We're looking to stage 1 million gallons. When we actually start up law, we'll be sending 8,000 gallon batches over to law. Those will get processed through the 2 melters that we have operating at 2,100 degrees. So this just shows that base process that I just talked through and some of the data associated with volumes and those kinds of things. And then it also shows the support entities. In the case of tank farms, they have the 222S laboratories, which does the tank waste sampling, water and utilities, and then the other ones that I talked about on the other slide. So this slide just kind of gives you a day in the life of how all of the different facilities and systems work together to process the low activity waste. Next slide, Mike. All right, this is where I hand off to Chris, and he's going to go one more level down on WTP.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning. All right, so I'm going to first start kind of at a high level, just kind of give you the lay of the land of what the waste treatment plant consists of, and then we'll start drilling down into where we're at in the facility. So first is let's talk about the DF law. So the DF law is made up of the effluent management facility, the analytical lab, the low activity waste facility, and then the balance of facilities. While the balance of facility only points to one building, balance of facilities is really all the utilities necessary to operate on the DF law island. So that includes the electrical power comes through the A5 substation, which is right here. So it's got power, steam, water, all the ammonia. We use ammonia for our selective catalytic oxidizer for off-gas treatment. We have chilled water. We have big, large chillers, just like you would see at a nuclear facility. It has all the utilities to self-sustain operations. And by the way, the picture up is east. So trying to tie back to Matt's presentation, the transfer line comes straight down right to EMF and then over to law. So, and then I'll just highlight a little bit of HLW. You can see it on the furthest east of the site. That facility is, we'll talk a little bit at the end of the presentation of the current status. Just wanted to point it out. And pre-treat is actually right underneath the sign of analytical lab, and that's currently on hold. And Matt will talk a little bit about the status of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so where are we today? So it is exciting times at WTP. On October 8th, we did initiate melter heat up. And melter heat up is about a 30-day operation, 20 to 30 days, depending on, and we're very deliberate and we're very intentional on how we're going to heat that melter. It has a lot of castable and refractory. So we slowly heat the melter up and we'll eventually get to 1200 degrees C. And I'll show it a little bit later of kind of the steps that we'll endure. About 36 hours into the operation, the melter was around 298 degrees F. And our operators identified that we started getting on a electrical panel for our startup heaters, we got a high temperature alarm. We monitor it, the ops folks monitor it very closely, and the temperature continued to rise. And what we have is we have 18 startup heaters in the melter, and we have 3 control panels, and each one of those control panels controls 6 heaters. One of those control panels was increasing in temperature. So we stopped the power on those 6 heaters, analyzed the situation, and made the decision at that time that we could use the other heaters, and we will just ramp back down in temperature on that melter very slowly, methodically, and intentionally. So today, the melter is back at ambient. We are troubleshooting the issue in the startup heater. We have brought in several subject matter experts across the world to help us resolve this issue. And the melter is in great shape. It went to 300 degrees. We cooled it right down very, very slowly. So right now we're just swarming literally a power supply panel, trying to troubleshoot the issue of we had a high current actually in a reactor. So with that said, it is really, really exciting. The operations, the conduct of ops, all the training and procedures that were demonstrated with our nuclear operators was flawless. I mean, they did exactly what they were trained to do. And the reaction and I won't call it emergency response. It wasn't an emergency response, but it was the right response and the right actions taken to not only bring the plant to a safe condition, but now the engineering team, the ops team is swarming the issue for resolution. But so moving forward, of kind of just stepping back a bit of where we are, the top left picture is the law facility. Construction's complete. We've done all the startup testing in law. The bottom left happens to be the law container. That container is 4 foot in diameter, 7 foot high. And that's the container being loaded into the import bay. And then on the right-hand picture happens to be a change control box. That box is used, so our melters are bubbled, and we change those bubblers out about every 28 days. And the bubblers, when we pull it out of the melter, they go into that CCB for contamination control. And you'll see a bit in another picture of how that CCB mounts onto the top of the melter. Next picture, please. So one thing to get ready for readiness to operate this fairly complex facility is we've been very methodical. We started off with people, plant, and paper. We got to have our people, we got to have our plant ready, and we got to have the paper ready to successfully operate. We've added the partnership with the department, the other Hanford contractors in the community is as important as people, plant, and paper. So we've worked hard in getting that alignment. And then there is a great amount of pride with all the women and men that have worked and contributed to design, construction, operating the facility over the last 21 years. Next slide, please. So talking a little bit about the people. So in the top left picture, that is the LAW control room. That is where we operate the law facility, the DF law facility. Those operators have went through a rigorous amount of training, including a simulator building. We have a simulator off-site that they go through comprehensive training and exams. Top right, we've brought in conduct of ops coaches. These conduct of op coaches are very experienced folks, and they're working right out in the field, working with all our operators, our plant management and maintenance to pass along some of the lessons learned and skills that they have in operating other nuclear facilities. Emergency preparedness. We need to be prepared for any sort of drill, and we have been practicing for several years, whether it's a fire drill, a take cover, you name it. We have practiced ammonia release. We continue to practice those drills. In fact, we just had one yesterday, I think, a fire drill on a particular building. So we will continue to perform those drills just to make sure that we take the right actions in the event of an emergency. And then the bottom right, you can't do this without the people. And so workforce appreciation events. I can't thank all the people that have contributed to getting us where we are today and moving forward and treating some of this waste. Next slide, please. The plant. So top left is the law facility. That's where we're loading silica or glass forming chemicals. We have 13 glass forming chemicals that we blend in with the waste to make compliant glass. The top right is the finishing line. As you can see, there's a lot of cranes, bogies, and equipment to move the containers in and out from the melter. The bottom left, I talked earlier about these change control boxes. This happens to be in the melter gallery. It's hard to see because of the shadows, but this is the top of melter 1. So those CCBs will sit over a port. We open up a gamma gate and we lift the bubblers in and out of the melter. And for startup heaters, we pull all the bubblers and we put, which was 18, and we put startup heaters in, and that is a startup heater right there on the right, and kind of gives you a perspective of size of how those startup heaters go into the melter. Next slide, please. So paper. While it is 2022, we are definitely not paperless at WTP, I can assure you. But verifying procedures, training, running drills, the paper needs to be as good so the operators know exactly what to go do. The engineering and configuration management needs to be correct and aligned. So significant amount of time has been spent in paper over the last 21 years. And a big emphasis when you go through readiness to make sure that paper is right. Next slide, please. So, as I've mentioned, melter heat up was initiated on the 8th. We are swarming the issue. We will get this issue resolved and restart the melter very soon. And not only are we going to learn from what happened, we're going to make sure we look at extended condition if it could happen somewhere else. We have other power supplies, other things on the facility. But the melter is the bottom left. It is 300 tons. Each melter will produce 15 metric tons of glass a day at full production rate. So that's 30 metric tons. There's 2 melters in the facility. The picture in the middle bottom, this is the melter, and this is the 2 pour spouts. So each melter you can pour out of in 2 locations. And then on the bottom right is in the pour cave. There's an elevator and a turntable. And if you look closely, you can see a lock container lifted up in the elevator, made it to the pour spout, and that's how we will fill the glass. The container will be lowered down, turned to the cooling condition, and when it turns to the cooling condition, the next lock container will come in. And then as it works out, that's where we would load and unload those containers, and those containers would get loaded onto those bogies you saw in a previous picture, and we run them back and forth. We have a storage area, large crane, and then it goes on for on-site for IDF disposal. So the melter will reach 2100 degrees F, about 1150 degrees C. After we get the melter heated up, we use glass frit, non-radioactive, and then we'll run cold commissioning simulant with glass formers through it. We'll pour a number of containers, demonstrate the process, and then we'll go through CCMA, Cold Commissioning Management Assessment. And Matt will talk a little bit more of our journey as we go through the different gates before we get to radioactive operations. And so a lot of this technology was built at Columbia, Maryland. We did a number of testing on the melter. We poured about 5 million pounds of glass. So it's the good investment by the department. We learned a lot, and we've applied it a lot to not only the design, but the operation of the melters. Next slide, please. Video. We're going to do the video? If you'd like, I will MC if you want a little bit. So this is the law melter, which is designed to heat up to 2100 degrees. I talked about the two pour spouts. Yes, sir. Careful, Steve. You'll sing with me. So this is a joule heated melter. It's Inconel 690 electrodes. The molten material becomes a resistor. Just your normal joule heated melter, exactly same technology you'd see at DWPF or West Valley. This is the top of the melter. This is where the bubblers and the startup heaters would go in those ports. The lid is put on, and now you're looking straight down into the top of the melter. So as the pool, and there's a better picture of it, so I'll wait. So here's the temporary heaters being installed right there where the bubblers would normally be. They're just your silicon carbide startup heaters. Heats up slowly to drive the water and help cure all the castables and refractory that's in the melter as we built it. So we heat up very, very slowly. And as we heat up, that's something I didn't mention, we have intervals that we adjust the jack bolts to make sure we apply the right tension and torque on the melter as it grows, as we heat up. We did reach the first jack bolt location adjustment at 300 degrees. That's the jack bolt adjustment that I was talking about. So at about 10 days, if we did it continuously, we would reach 2100 degrees. And now we're going to show our first frit addition that goes into the melter. So frit is just glass beads, non-radioactive. We'll put about 23,000 pounds of frit in this first load. We'll bring it up and cover about 75 to 80% of the electrodes. Again, it's still all under startup heaters. We put three bubblers in, I believe, and the bubblers are installed just to help mix the glass so we don't get hot streaking when we go to initiate joule heating. So here we're going to start initiating joule heating, and then we'll do the second round of frit, and I think it's around 83 to 9,000 pounds of frit. So now it raises the pool to 25 inches. Now the electrodes are fully covered, so now we can start moving, increasing the power on joule heating, decreasing the power on the startup heaters, and then we will very methodically start pulling the startup heaters, and you'll start seeing the bubblers come into the melter. That's the CCB that I'm talking we showed in the picture. Then we top off the melter with frit, and we're fully loaded, and then we will pour our first container. I think we're in a poor container.
All right, we can jump to the next slide. All right, so we're going to take a step back and we're going to look at the overall journey to readiness to be able to actually provide hot feed to the low activity waste facility. So this graphic is intended to highlight the climb that we have to take to get from finishing construction all the way up until we introduce that first hot feed. The analogy we like to use is that the engineering, procurement, and construction were the foothills. If you think of Mount Whitney in California, it's about 200 miles from the coast. So that's a significant journey to get to the foothills, but it's the last 10% that you're climbing up the mountain to get to the top. So this just tries to highlight, on the left side is highlighting the formal mechanisms that we use to validate the people, plant, and paper. There's a set of core requirements and criteria that are used to evaluate that. There are discrete steps along the way. So on the left side, from a formal readiness standpoint, we had to do a pre-startup safety review to support receipt of the anhydrous ammonia. The anhydrous ammonia is used as part of the off-gas treatment train to deal with the NOx that we know will be coming off the cold cap from the melter. So that we have not received that ammonia, excuse me, but we have done the pre-startup safety review. That's a process safety management required review. That's part of the regulations associated with chemicals. Just prior to starting the melter heat up that Chris summarized for you, they went through an operational readiness checklist. That's a very deliberate tool that's evaluating the people, plant, and paper, that they're all integrated, that they're actually functioning as intended. As we fill the melter with the glass and the frit, and we filled those first couple of containers, then we're going to switch to a tuning feed. So we're going to add simulant. That simulant allows us to receive it as though it were tank waste, and then add the glass formers to then mix it and feed the melter. We'll start with a tuning feed simulant, and then we'll do additional validation of the operation of the melter, the checkout of the melter. We'll do and these will be time frame. They'll be very close together, even though on the slide they look like they're sequential. They're right in the same time frame. We'll do an emergency preparedness exercise. That's to make sure that the people, plant, and paper are ready to respond to emergencies. As Chris pointed out, we've done a number of drills and upset conditions over the last couple of years. This will actually be a graded activity that's part of that formal process. The cold commissioning management assessment is a validation that happens before we will add a simulant that can create the off-gas hazards. So NOx being a primary example of that. We will do a formal assessment to validate that. They'll validate that their safety basis is implemented. Then we'll allow that additional feed. That'll allow us to challenge the off-gas components to confirm that each one of them is performing their function with their associated decontamination factors, taking the hazards out of the off-gas. Then we'll proceed up through bringing the second melter online. Very same process, but obviously that puts two melters online at the same time. So that'll challenge the systems further. Then we get into the final stages of commissioning, where we're doing the operational readiness reviews. That starts with a formal review that's contractor-led, contractor-evaluated. Once that's completed and we've confirmed closure of any what we call pre-start actions, those are actions that would have a consequence on the safe operation of the facility. Then we bring in a Department of Energy readiness, formal operational readiness review, and they'll perform their final review, and then there'll be authorization to operate the low activity waste facility. So this is all facility centric. Then on the right side is really DOE Hanford centric. So that's a process that we call the phase gate process. That's to validate that not only is Chris ready to run the law facility, but are all of the support facilities across Hanford ready to provide Chris with what he needs. So as an example, before we got into Melter 1 heat up, the mission support contractor and the A6 substation had to be prepared to provide for nominally 400 megawatts of electrical power. That's not an insignificant load. So First thing we did was phase gate 1 was to look at integration. Do we have all the right interface control documents in place? Have each of the contractors established their processes and procedures to make sure that they're meeting their roles, responsibilities, authorities, and accountabilities for those ICDs? Second gate was one that looked at melter 1 heat up, and that's really along the lines of the examples that I just gave with submission support, but there's a whole array. That's water, all of the other support entities that needed to happen. We'll do another gate prior to melter 2 heat up, and then we'll do the final one prior to hot operations. So this is really, DOE Hanford is on the right side and facility centric is on the left side. And it's our job to make sure that those are going hand in hand throughout the process. And one of the things that Chris said that I do want to highlight, this readiness that was performed to support melter 1 heat up validated all the people, plant, and paper were in place. And this upset condition where we had elevated temperatures in the power supply was the first test of that. And not only was it a test, it had some of those human air traps that you will find in industry when things go poorly, right? It happened in nominally the middle of the night. It started around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and the decision to systematically cool down occurred at 11:30. So it's at night, there's distractions, we're operating a facility for the first time. Those are all things that are error traps and can lead to people making mistakes. In this particular case, the operators did exactly what was intended. They followed their procedures, which were also established to address that upset condition and others. And we kept the plant in a safe condition. So that validation was further reinforced by the behaviors that occurred when we were going through initial melter 1 heat up. Next slide. All right, so I need to shift gears. That's all of the direct feed low activity waste discussion we were going to have. I also wanted to talk briefly about the other side of our tank waste treatment mission, which is the high level waste facility and where we're headed with that. Next slide. Okay, so what we're doing right now is we are ramping up the overall design effort for the high level waste facility. The department has performed an analysis of alternatives and are in discussions with ecology regarding which of those alternatives is the preferred that will be selected. And that's being done in the form of holistic negotiations. But we know that regardless of the alternative that's selected, the high level waste facility needs to finish its design, and we need to start ramping up back up to procurement and construction. So right now we're taking the lessons learned that we gained from the direct feed low activity waste activity. We're systematically evaluating those and applying them to our high level waste path forward. And then we're starting to apply those. So the design effort has ramped up considerably. The limited construction for those systems and activities that we have completed the design and are ready to resume, those will start up here in the not too distant future. Next slide. Okay, so that's the high level discussion from that. And I think we're at the point where we can answer questions.
So before we jump into questions, let's check in with Dan McDonald at Ecology and EPA. We usually check in with the regulators before we open questions. If you have a question, we've got 29 people logged into Teams, as well as the folks in the room. So either put your name card up or indicate in chat and we'll start that list. Dan, are you with us?
I am. Thank you so much. Matt and Chris, both of you, thank you so much for the presentation. I enjoyed the video too. That was well done. Both condolences and congratulations on what occurred there. Condolences that it occurred, congratulations that it occurred when it did. Had we been further along and we'd had Frit in there, or we would had been in further production evolution, it would have been a whole different story. So kudos and well done to your crew for catching it quickly and doing what was appropriate to get that system shut down as they did. So thank you for that. Secondly, Matt, you spoke about a variety of things that needed to be done in, if you will, get ready space. I would ask that the HAB not forget that there's an environmental performance demonstration test. There's a variety of other kinds of things that involved more than just the contractors that were talked about. Ecology is certainly involved, not only in the environmental performance demonstration test, but in permit maintenance and also in certifications. Department of Health is involved as it relates to air. So when you think about the community that's involved in making this thing a success, It is EPA, it is ecology, it is Department of Energy, it is all of the contractors on site. And if you will, this is a very complex, sometimes cumbersome situation that moves us forward to make all of this happen. And for the HAB, primarily the new folks, if you can think of this in a life cycle way, so from start to finish, there are contractors throughout the whole thing. There are contractors through part of it. There are contractors who pick up later. Department of Energy, Department of Ecology, EPA are involved throughout all of these evolutions. And it takes all of us to get this done correctly. I would offer too, again, congratulations on the how far this has come. For those of us, Matt and Chris and myself and some others who've been around here a long time, this has been a long time coming. So hopefully we're starting to see the corner turned on making this happen. Now, for high level waste, I agree with Matt. There's a variety of things that are ongoing that, quite honestly, given holistic negotiations, that we're not really free to talk about. Suffice it to say that progress is being made on all fronts, on legal front, technical front, project front, and more will come once a lot of these particular initiatives have come to fruition. I would ask the board to be patient relative to high level waste because we're quite frankly not there yet. Ruth?
Right. Is anyone in the room from EPA who wants to add a comment?
No.
Okay. EPA tends to be a little less involved in this. We've got 6 folks in queue. We have an absolute hard stop at 11:15 to check for public comment. So we will go as far as we're able. Pam, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. I have friends that work at HLW, and they have indicated to me that they are at a stopping point in terms of proceeding because they don't know what their feed is going to be. And that was an interesting statement to me. And I realize you're in negotiation space, but you keep referring to alternatives. What alternatives are you talking about? Can you share any of that?
So as Dan pointed out, that's all part of the overall negotiation. So we can't talk in detail about the alternatives, just that they've been performed. There's a number of them on the table and they're being worked through the system. But I do think relative to the comment that you just made, Chris, you could probably talk a little bit about the flow sheet, which does evaluate the feed to the high level waste facility. So from a technical standpoint, we are looking at that waste stream, what that means relative to the design and construction of the facility, and what the implications of that are. So if you want to take just a minute, Chris.
Yeah, I think from a standpoint of pause, we've been working with the department closely on the flow sheet. For the most part, the HLW facility, as it was designed, intended to be designed, can handle the alternatives. So we are, with the department support, have reinitiated engineering. We are getting ready to restart procurement. And in the very near future, we're going to restart construction to get the building to a weathering in perspective so we don't have to deal with all the weather and the critters and that. So, and just in construction alone, that's about a 24-month to get it weathered in. So it kind of gives you a perspective that we're quite a ways along in the civil side of it. So we're in good shape there. But the parts that in engineering that we have to go, we got a pretty big lift in both electrical, CNI, and some of the mechanical aspects. But from a flow sheet perspective, we are in good shape. We know we've identified a couple things that we may need to change to accommodate a new flow sheet, but they're fairly minor to the facility.
Thank you. My second question, the HAB has been engaged with this from groundbreaking, and we have followed the development of the bubblers, aware of their application at Savannah River site. Can the bubblers be replaced if you have a bubbler failure?
We change out the bubblers every 26 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I just, a thought for our new people. In going on the tour, obviously visitors don't get to go into law anymore like we did during construction. And we watched it from the ground up and saw the turntables and saw how it's constructed. It's absolutely massive and beautiful. And it makes me sad that the Department of Energy wants to get rid of everybody that has historical knowledge on this board, because I think historical knowledge is valuable. That's just Pam's opinion. Thank you.
Rob Davis.
Yes, I have a couple questions. The first one is having to do with Tisker, and is any more pre-treatment going to be necessary to handle that waste that you're running through Tisker to meet spec 7 of the contract for Bechtel?
You asking in context of law? The answer would be no.
LAW.
For LAW, there is not any changes to Tisker.
Okay, so the
Not
chemistry
that I'm aware of.
profile will be the same.
Yeah.
Then the next question is that in these alternatives, having been a principal research scientist for Bechtel and picking the materials for the high-level waste and the parts of the pre-treat in LAW, you know that we had specific requirements in our contracts that you would ship that waste to the plant under that met those specifications. Is that being highlighted in your alternative studies?
I can't speak what's in the alternative study. I've never seen it.
Okay.
That's not part of,
Well,
part of my
I'm
role,
just
so.
concerned that, you don't want to set the plant back too far.
So
Because
I do know in the context of the alternatives and the design, we have technical folks who have been engaged along the way. So I can't speak to any specific alternative or that technical piece, but I can tell you that we've had technical people engaged that look at all of that along the way.
All right, thank you. Chris, good presentation. Just for everybody to know, I used to work with Chris or for Chris or ancillary. But Chris, there was a discussion here earlier about the Defense Board, DNFSB. Could you kind of enlighten us a little bit of the DNFSB's role in the LAW, DF law, high level weight, the whole business? Thank you.
So we have the DNFSB we have local reps on site, and they participate as a team member on all daily functions, and particularly in the nuclear safety side. But we have a great relationship with our local DNFSB rep, and we see, I would say, I see them weekly, but our nuclear safety personnel are working with them on a daily basis.
Could you speak the acronym DNS, whatever it is? Yeah, well, let's hear it.
Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board. And so their role, when you asked about their role, the role is the same as for any other nuclear facility across the site. And I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to know they get more and more engaged the closer and closer we get to operations, because that's their primary focus, is the handling of the nuclear safety hazards and how those controls are established. But they do engage on design. And as Chris stated, their focus is on those nuclear safety controls, like the documented safety analysis. But we do see they're involved on a regular basis, and we have an interface with them regularly and discuss those technical aspects that they either have questions or concerns on, and work our way through those. Just like we did all the other nuclear facilities on the Hanford site.
I would draw the comparison to the NRC for commercial nuclear as the defense board for the DOE defense facilities.
NRC being the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
I didn't catch that. Yeah.
NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We have a
Yeah,
lot
that's correct.
we have a lot of new people in the room, and I don't want their heads to explode from acronyms on their first day or their
Absolutely.
second day.
That's a great point. Yeah, so the DNFSB, although there's some similarities, there's also differences, because the department's the owner and the regulator as well. So, but there are definitely similarities. I would say they're also like, if you're from a Navy nuclear shipyard environment, they're like NRO. which I'm not, by the way, please don't write that down because that's just another analogy. And I don't want to go talk about the shipyard, but.
All right. I've got 5 people in queue. Steve and then Chris. Steve Anderson.
Pam addressed those, thanks. And
All
Chris,
right.
thank you very much.
Chris and then Todd. Chris.
In the last 3 or 4 monthly consent decree reports that ORP puts out, the same 4 or 5 issues have been listed as contributing to work being done slower than expected and at a higher cost than expected. And I wondered if you could just discuss some of the, I could read them off for you, but I wondered if you could just discuss some of the issues that you're aware of. Are they major, minor, the normal kinds of things you expect when bringing a complicated plant and up into commissioning?
Well, good question. Thank you. I would classify them as things that the discovery items in starting a plant with this sort of complexity. And give you some examples. One of the things that we've been going through is we have a lot of controls and instrumentations that interface with our control system and our control network. And we have had a number of, if you will, errors that occur, and you got to have our CNI techs out there work those out. And then they need to interface with the equipment and make sure that when you ask the crane to go up, it will go up and not down, just normal things that you would expect in a complicated facility. We have some other things in cranes, things that we thought were going to work. They didn't work. So we'd bring in the vendor. The vendor would work side by side with us, and we would make adjustments via some cases, a small design change to resolve them. And then on our off-gas equipment, for those that know, we do have a fairly complex off-gas system that has a lot of controls. So it fits into the control system, and then in getting them all to work together is really what our whole commissioning and startup is about. And not everything, we weren't able to turn on the button and everything worked just right. So it's taken a lot of adjustments. And in those adjustments come making sure your operators are proficient and understand how all that operates together. So those are some of the major things that's contributed to some of the schedule and cost variance that you're alluding to. Matt?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the other part is that, for example, the effluent management facility came into being as part of the direct feed low activity waste program. That particular facility started construction in the 2017, 2018 timeframe, so it's relatively new. We didn't find as much discovery because we didn't have components that had been in an extended construction mode like some of the law components. So we had more aging and obsolescence. So that means we may have tested an individual pressure or level instrument, flow instrument, and the instrument itself worked fine, but it no longer talks to the software network, which we call the integrated control network. So those kind of mismatches in a lot of cases ended up being the software has evolved and it has continued to mature, and the instrument now doesn't talk to it. So we had to go buy a new instrument that would talk to that particular component. So and by the way, that's an expected thing that we expected to have happen during commissioning. We continue to have those on occasion. And then some of them are as simple, Chris mentioned some of the hoisting and rigging. Some of them are as simple as a bolt that's holding the rail in place sticks out farther than was intended, and it becomes an interference with the actual hoist when it's going up and down the rails. And so you got to go, and that's relatively easy, but when you run into those things, if you only traveled the crane through 20% of its travel when you first started because the doors were closed and you can't get it into the pour cave, for example, when you open it up and find out, hey, there's an interference when you're 60% through its travel, those are the kind of things we find in commissioning. They're absolutely expected things. Some of them you can anticipate and the project has, and other ones you go off and you fix them when you find them. So those are just some of the examples.
Thank you.
I've got Todd and then Tom Galiotto. Todd?
All right, I think we can answer this in 4 minutes, maybe not. Thank you for the video, as I'm new, so it was really useful to me. It sort of reminds me of the world's greatest sous vide is what that is, heating up everything. I have two questions. One, how long does it take from the time you put the first frit in until you do the pour? And second, as a new guy, remind me the definition of low activity and high activity.
So from the time we turn on the heaters from ambient to 1150 degrees C is, if everything goes with no interruption, it's around 20 days. After about 10 of those days is when we start introducing frit. So after 10 days, then we'll introduce frit, and then we'll slowly continue to ramp up and get the electrodes covered. The difference between low activity waste and high level waste, or high activity waste, is low activity waste is very low in radioactivity. In fact, it's basically, other than a couple areas in law, it's a hands-on facility. So all the radionuclides, the solid, the cesium, et cetera, is all removed. That's what TSCR does. Tank side cesium removal removes all the cesium and the solids. A high-level waste facility is a fully remote handled facility, fully shielded. Certainly areas that once we button that up, you won't go back in. So that's the main difference between the high-level waste. Will see the cesium, the americium, all the gamma that you get from the radionuclides.
Yeah, those heavier nuclides, heavy metals and everything else. So if you just think about it from a practical standpoint, the low activity waste is that liquid that has some contaminants in it, but they're generally soluble and they're at the top of the tank that's been pre-treated to take out the cesium and the particulate. And the high level waste is that remaining, whether it's the sludges or the salt cake, which obviously has liquid in it as well, but it's that higher density, which ends up being the alpha and the heavier mixed fission products that came out of the processing.
All right. So we're going to take a breath here. Tom and Jan, I know I'm interrupting the queue, but we need to take time for public comment to honor that time. Lacey, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
No one is signed up in the room.
No one is signed up in the room. If you would like to make public comment and you're in the room, give Lacey a sign, a wave, standing up, something that she can see. If you are online with us, let us know in chat if you would like to make public comment. Now is the time. We've got one person on the phone, last four digits 8217. Would you care to make public comment on the phone? Again, if you want to make public comment, either put it in chat or give Lacey a wave if you've got something you would like to share with the group. Anyone? Lacey, are you seeing anything?
No, nothing in the room.
All right. This is one of those times you've got to speak up and let us know. So what I'm going to propose is we go back to the queue. I have Tom Galeotto and Jan Cottrell, and then we need to adjourn this HAB meeting no later than 11:30 for the transition to the next topic after break, which is the Hanford 5-year plan. So Tom Galeotto, what's on your mind?
Thanks, Ruth. I have, by the way, thanks for this very informative discussion. I think it's really helpful for our ongoing understanding of the process, which is critical to our Hanford cleanup needs. I've got two questions in the area of quantification, if you can answer those a little bit more on the glass production, and one on more of a speculative question on the facility. The two questions on how we quantify the process. You mentioned that each melter can produce or will be able to produce an output 15 metric tons of glass per day. How many actual containers is that?
So that would be a total of 30 metric tons a day. And that's the high capacity. That's not nominal. Nominal is around 23 metric tons a day. So at 23 metric tons a day, we kick out about 3.5 cans a day. And at 30, it's almost just about 4.5 containers a day. With that's both melters.
So the nominal is 23 metric tons per day and 3.5 canisters per day is what you're thinking from both?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. And stepping back a little bit in the process from that, I know you're staging 1 million gallons or so of treated waste to start the process. How many gallons of actual low-level waste is in each container? To get a feel for how are we processing this quantity down?
So I'll give you a more macro. If we're at our design rate, we will process about 1 million gallons a year. So you could do the math to get that one, and I haven't done that one in my head. But
Okay.
it's basically 1 tank's worth per year is our design rate.
Okay. Okay, that's great. And the speculative question was, I know you probably can't answer this yet, but this high temperature alarm issue with the melter number 1 could be fairly insignificant, or it could be a major problem, I would think. What is your process to determine the issue, and what do you speculate this in terms of interruption of the process?
So I'll let Chris talk about the details, but I do want to be clear. So the particular high temperature was in a power supply cabinet. The melter itself is there is no potential for any damage to the melter and its components. So everything you saw in the animation, all of that is there's no indication there's anything that's wrong with that. However, those startup heaters that you see that came in on the top, as Chris pointed out earlier, there's 3 power supplies. Each power supply serves 6 of those heaters. One of those power supplies has a one of the inductors in it failed, and right now they're looking at the cause of that failure, and then making sure that that's not a common cause with the other 2 cabinets. So we've only had one that failed. We want to make sure the other 2 are fully healthy, functioning, and then restore that third one. So this is a support system, external. It's not in the melter bay. It's actually out in the exterior part of the facility. But it's a power supply that supports that startup heaters themselves. We'll look at other power supplies to make sure they don't have a similar condition once we've confirmed the cause. But it isn't a particularly significant issue because it's only in one cabinet, but we'll have to confirm that it's not something that we could have pop up elsewhere. So Chris, I don't know if you want to go in a little more detail, but.
The cabinets are literally about the size of a file cabinet, each of them. So, and we have a reactor that we know has got high current, and we're working through that reactor with the vendor as we speak. Matter of fact, they're in a call today with the vendor, and we'll get a better understanding of what might have happened to that reactor on high current. But Matt's right. It's a cabinet located out in the corridor. It's not even in the melter gallery, actually. So, but we're working through it, and we're using we're doing a parent cause evaluation and a detailed extended condition, which is our quality tools that we use to document these sorts of things. And then extended condition is really important. We want to make sure what we learn here, we apply it to other places in the plant.
Well, great. That helps a lot. Thank you.
The only other thing I do want to clarify, for those people who have been in the nuclear industry for a long time, Chris isn't referring to a reactor in the nuclear sense, but if you're an electrician, it probably makes a lot of sense. So it's really an inductor that's in the power supply that conditions that signal that's coming in that then drives the load, which is the startup heaters. So just so everybody understands, this is an electrical form of what they call a line reactor. So it's basically an inductor.
Thank you, Matt. Good clarification.
Right. We're going to do one last question and then close the meeting out. And it all falls on Jan because you get the last question and you get to close the meeting.
Oh, I like it. Okay, so I have two short answer questions and one that is a little bit more technical. Is the low activity waste building the building that was formerly known as the waste treatment plant?
The low activity waste facility is one of the buildings that are part of the waste treatment and mobilization plant. So the overhead that Chris showed, WTP contains what we call the balance of facilities. Those are all the support facilities like steam, water, cooling water, electricity. Then the low activity waste handles the low activity waste portion. The high level waste facility will address the high level waste. The analytical lab is providing analytical lab services for both of those facilities. So WTP is the entire footprint. Low activity waste is one facility with one portion of the mission, which is the low activity portion of the tank waste treatment mission.
Thank you. What's in FRIT?
I'll let you do that one.
Frit is really just silica,
Oh.
mainly silica, calcium, sodium. They make it into a glass, they shatter it, and we use that in the melter as to heat up, because that will provide the molten glass material that we use to start up the melters. Good
That
question.
makes perfect sense. Thank you. And my last question really has to do with this anhydrous ammonia. I know that it's really toxic, and I'm wondering what the characteristics are of anhydrous ammonia that, contributes to the making of the glass, and whether, when you talk about a complex off-gas interface, is that because you have to deal with the anhydrous ammonia, or is it consumed in the process?
So anhydrous ammonia is not used necessarily to make the glass. It's used to treat the off gas. We have high nitrates, and we use ammonia with a selective catalytic reduction process. So it mixes, and you get a reaction to destroy the NOx, so we don't emit NOx out of the stack.
Wow, that was an elegant answer. Thank you. So that means that we have now adjourned the meeting. There is another thing on your agenda, but that is considered to be a public meeting hosted by the Department of Energy, and you are welcome to continue, to remain here to hear that. So please take a break. We are going to be vacating the head table, but the people get to stay where they are, right? So you're good for the break, and then you can come back if you so choose.
And
Thank
Jan,
you.
Jan,
Yes?
one second. Earlier, I tried to show a pie chart that didn't turn out too well. We do have paper copies on the back table,
Oh.
so please grab one on your way out. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for getting those together so quickly.
We have an awesome support team.
We do.
So Ruth, back at 11:45?
Yes, back at 11:45.